20 years an addict, sidelined by his family and took a hit at work. Hussein Salim, a resident of Mombasa, which is a hotspot in drug and substance abuse, will be making his submissions as narrated to Kevin Mutai. Nancy Wanjiro Hinga's son, the now late Patrick Hinga, came into the limelight when a former classmate got him off the streets and into a rehab as he was a drug addict. Gina Kirori is on that set of submissions of a mother and caregiver's journey. What goes through the mind of a drug addict? Mercy Musau is a professional psychologist whose insights the court will get to hear. Zainab Ismail will take her through her submissions on factors around drug and substance abuse. Masa Niamutudho, a phrase coined after him and his push while he was the chairman of NACADA. John Mutudho, in his passion to address the drug and substance abuse menace, opened a rehabilitation center, JOMEC. Bridget Ngana seeks his views for submission to the court. Victor Okioma is the Chief Executive Officer of the National Authority for the Campaign Against Alcohol and Drug Abuse, NACADA, and will be making his case before this court as I seek to know the policy issues and action from the state agency tasked with public education and awareness campaign against drug use, especially among the youth.
Your Honor, now this is a matter which some may consider to be dragging on for too long. But the fact that it is still dragging lives into the mud and through the mud of helplessness and hopelessness, we are going to address it as it demands. Drug use and abuse remains a touchy matter, Your Honor, and we intend to address it in our news court, the court of public opinion, where we address matters that matter. We bring various persons of interest and various submissions before this honorable court and let you, Justice Wanjiko, the Mwananchi, be the judge. And tonight we step into the space of rehabilitation and the access to the same and the dynamics around it. Our virtual court now invites Kevin Mutai to make his submissions to this court.
Your Honor, greetings from Mombasa, one of the hotspots when it comes to drug use and abuse, where the promise has been sucked out of the young, promising lives, a narcotic at a time. Your Honor, we wish to table a first-hand account of this vice before the court.
Majina naitwa Hussein Salim, ama kwa jina la mtaani Spinky, na upande wa uraibu, mambo ya urafiki na maswaiba, kukaa ile na watu ndio kidogo lichangia mpaka nikajishtukizia na mimi nimeingia kwenye uraibu. Ukweli nimetumia miadarati kwa kama miaka 20 hivi. Kwenye upande wa maisha imeniathiri sana sababu imeniharibia kibarua nilichokuwa nafanya. Ikaniweka kando na family. Nilikaa nikaumia sana kwenye uraibu kiasi cha kwamba mpaka kuja kupata usaidizi. Katokeza usaidizi, nikapata usaidizi, nikaambiwa kuna mahali naweza pelekwa, nikasaidika kidogo. Ikabidi nikubali na mimi nikupata usaidizi. Nililetwa sehemu moja, shirika moja linaitwa Reach Out Trust Center. Nikafikishwa hapo, nikaja hapo, nikakaribishwa vizuri. Nikaelezea matatizo niliyokuwa nayo. Hapo ni kama rehab sababu ni mahali ambako wanashughulika na watu walioathirika na miadarati.
Ukaweza kupata usaidizi aina gani?
Hapo nilipata usaidizi, nilikalishwa chini, nikapewa counseling, alafu baadaye nikapata support hapo, nikaanza dawa ambayo ni methadone. Nilitumia methadone kama miaka 2, kisha nikaja relapse kidogo. Nikarudi tena nikaja nikapata counseling vizuri, nikarudi tena kwa methadone miaka 4 na nimekunywa dawa safi bila uraibu. Ujumbe ambao ningeutoa shirika kama NACADA, wapeane usaidizi, watoe support sana kwa mashirika kama haya kina Reach Out, wazidi kutusaidia sisi ambao ni wanyonge tulioko nyanjani kupata usaidizi.
That's just one of the many accounts that classifies Mombasa as a hotspot and are more heated than a weed joint. My submissions, Your Honor.
Your Honor.
Your Honor, if I may interject, can you imagine the pain that loved ones of these drug addicts are forced to endure, watching their loved ones go through this anguish of the heartbreaking cycle of drug abuse? And as cliché as it sounds, but truthful nonetheless, What about the families, the mothers who are left behind with the fruits of their womb going through this heartbreaking cycle, watching them waste away into a highly degradable state?
Mimi naitwa Nancy Wajiro Hinga. Niko hapa kuongea kuhusu drug addiction. Nimekuwa kwa hiyo njia miaka karibu 15. Hinga alianza kuvuta bangi akiwa miaka 14, akiwa vile alienda secondary form 1. Mwaka wa pili nikaitwa na mwalimu wao. Akaniambia Hinga amekuwa mzuri, lakini wale vijana wameshikana na watu wengine wako wanavuta bangi. Na juu hataki aingilie, naweza mbadilisha nimtransfer nimpeleke shule ingine. Nikamchukua nikamtransfer. Saa hiyo alikuwa anakaa Wangige, walikuwa anakaa na shosho yake. Na mimi nilikuwa nafanya kazi Kayole. Sasa nikaonelea ni vizuri nimchukue nimpeleke Kayole, nikamtafutia shule huko. Nikafikiria ataacha. Kumbe huko ndio alikuta ndio ziko mingi, akaingilia, akaanza kuvuta. Hata the first year alianza kuvuta. Ndio mwalimu wao akakuja akaniambia Hinga akiwa shuleni hakuna kitu anafanya, ni kukaa tu, hata angalia tu blackboard, hakuna kitu anafanya, anakaa tu amezubaa. Akakuja kuuliza kwani ni nini, alikuja mpaka nyumbani. Akatwambia afadhali tumpeleke hospitali kwanza tujue. Tulienda Bagathi Hospital. Akapimwa akaambiwa ni withdraw, wako na withdraw symptom. Ni vitu alikuwa anatumia, sasa anajaribu kuacha. Saa ndio zinamuaffect. Tukaambiwa twende Mathare. Kuadmitiwa Mathare akakaa kama mwezi moja, akakuwa mzuri. Tukaandikiwa mandawa na akaandikiwa awe anaenda clinic. Tukakaa akalilapse, ikabidi tena twende Mathare. The first time tulilipa 10,000 akiingia on admission. Akitoka tukalipishwa tena pesa ingine mingi. Ilikuwa kitu 20,000. Akatoka na akapewa mandawa na akapewa clinic. Tuwe tunaenda every Tuesday. Akakaa vizuri for kitu mwezi 2. Tena akalilapse. Tukarudi tena huko Mathare. Sasa imekuwa ajani. Ilikuwa alienda Mathare karibu mara 8. Tukasema acha tujaribu tuone kama tunaweza pata pesa. Juu kuna rehabilitation nyingine tulikuwa tumeambiwa tunaweza mpeleka. Saa hiyo rehabilitation walikuwa wametuitisha kitu 80k for miezi 3. Ati wakatuambia hata atapona kabisa. Tulikuwa na chama ya wamama ingine Equity, tukaenda nikakopa, sikuambia wamama napeleka mtoto hospitali. Tukakaa akakaa miezi 2. Mwezi wa 3 nilimuona kwa nyumba, tulikuwa tunakaa Kayole. Nikamuuliza kwani imekuaje? Akaniambia huko sio kuzuri, hakuna kitu tunapata huko. Alikuja akakaa siku 2 tena akaingilia huko kwa madawa ya kulevya. Vile sasa nilikasirika juu niliona kama anataka tu kunitesa. Nikampigia makelele akatoroka akaenda Wangige. Wangige ndio nimezaliwa na ndio watu wetu wako. Sasa huko amekuwa akikaa huko na juu watu wanamjua huko. Huko ndio alikuwa naona ni kuzuri. Juu akikuja huku na mtetesha juu naona kama ananitesa. Akivuta mabangi analilapse lazima tungepeleka hospitali. Sasa nikatafuta mahali nikakopa tena kwa Shyrocks. Nikampeleka Mathare. Sasa kumpeleka Mathare ndio saa wakanielezea kuhusu NHIF sijui nini. Sasa nikaanza kulipa sasa NHIF. The 4th time ndio hiyo NHIF ilimsaidia. Juu tulienda hatukuitishwa ile admission fee ya 10k. Tulitumia hiyo NHIF. Akaingia akakaa. Sasa ile nilikuwa natumia ni fare ya kutoka Kayole kwenda kumuona. Tukakaa tena akatoka. Sasa akija nyumbani badala ya kuzikunywa anatafuta bangi. Sasa saa hiyo akakuwa wasi. Nikashindwa sasa nitafanya nini? Tulienda Mathare karibu mara 8. Sasa hiyo mara ya 8 ndio msichana mwingine anaitwa Wanjamwaura alimkuta Wangige. Ndio sasa akamweka kwa mtandao, watu wakamuona, wakamsaidia. Sasa vile walimsaidia nilishukuru juu alipelekwa retreat ingine. Nilikuwa naitamani juu nilikuwa nasikia ni mzuri. Lakini kuangalia mfuko sigeweza kulipa. Saa vile Wanja alikuja akamchukua akampeleka huko, niliona ni an answered prayer na nikashukuru Mungu. Akaenda akakaa na akakuwa mzuri, akakaa for 8 months huko retreat. Wakati alitoka retreat hata hakumaliza 1 hour. Akatoroka akaenda Wangigi. Huko tena akaenda akaharibika. Ndio tukaenda tukamchukua, tukamrudisha Mathare. Mathare alikaa kama miezi 3. Juu nakumbuka hiyo 2018 kulikuwa na strike na nurse strike. Sio wakati akapewa ruhusa. Wote wakaachiliwa. Wakakuja. Vile Hinga alikuja tukaandikiwa mandawa. Hiyo mandawa hata haikupatikana Mathare. Tukaambiwa tukanunue. Hata ni daktari mwingine yako huko akatuambia tumpatie pesa anajua mahali atazitoa. Sasa hiyo hata daktari walikuwa wamemwambia make sure either kama unavuta hizo bangi usikunywe hizi ndawa, ama kama unakunywa hizi ndawa usikunywe hizo. Juu ikiingia hiyo combination sio mzuri kwa mwili yako. Sasa hivyo ndio ilifanyika, akakunywa, akavuta hizo ndawa, tena akaenda huko tena akakunywa hizo, akavuta bangi. Ndio tukaitiwa akiwa amekufa.
My lords, my ladies, such submissions would have anyone saying, my lord, how do we have less of such experiences? With more people being rehabilitated and in effect, less people being damaged?
More or less. Justice Onjiku, if I may, my lords and ladies, see, what drives people into the abyss is more than just a bit concerning. Well, it is also something that would be invaluable to understand. If this honorable court will allow, as we seek to at least understand what goes through the mind of a person who resorts to drug and substance abuse, allow me to ask the Mercy Mweni Musau to also please take the stand. Thank you, Mercy. Allow us to understand what drug and substance abuse is all about, and just how would you classify a person who is addicted to drugs?
Addiction, especially of alcohol and the other most locally found substances of choices, it is the #1 lead to the most many other mental illnesses such as depression and anxiety, which is very common among patients or people living with addiction in their last stages, or what we call the late stage of addiction, of alcoholism. You will find them with depression. You will find them with anxiety. And not to fail to mention that most of these substances, they trigger even psychosis, what in our local language we call wazimu. And again, also something we call bipolar, because the chemicals you take in your substance of choice are most likely to go and change your brain chemicals. Now, the chemicals in most of the alcohol substances will have what will enable the brain to produce what we call the feel-good hormone or chemical, which is the dopamine. Now, we have a certain system in the brain called the reward circuit or the reward system. And the reward system is responsive to the dopamine or the feel-good chemical. Now, when this person takes alcohol or any other substance, and especially stimulators, what will happen is the circulatory system is going to be rewarded by the production of the dopamine.
All right.
And so with time, you realize that this person is not able to control, because the brain will require more and more of the production of dopamine. Remember, it is not a supply of dopamine. You produce on demand.
And we've seen mental health suddenly attributed to the high use and abuse of drugs, not just in the country, globally as well. What are some of the other factors perhaps would you attribute to a person leading into that path?
Well, there is peer pressure, of course. 50% of addicts or people who get into addiction, it is contributed by genes. When there's the biological predisposition of genes that were already from someone who was struggling with addiction or someone who is alcoholic. So there's the biological makeup to it. Then now there's the social factors like peer pressure. Then there is other things like unemployment, stress, and also chronic diseases where someone wants just to numb the pain. And so the causes could be so many. Yes.
When we look at the effective treatments that are available for those who are in that category and wish to recover, what are perhaps some of these treatments that are available in the country right now?
Rehabilitation is not the first stage. Psychotherapy is the first stage. And then detox. We take that person through detoxification. And then now they can go into the rehabilitation center where they can stay for the 90 or 120 days. Because the relapse rate is 70%, meaning out of every 10 patients we are treating of addiction, we are expecting only 3 of them to come out of there fully rehabilitated. Likelihood of 7 of them relapsing are very high because it is a chronic condition, just like a diabetes, just like cancer. Someone can be treated and they can get to good today and they go into remission, but it has a likelihood of coming back. That is what we call the relapse. But for the mwananchi, it is important for you to know the first stage is seek therapy for your loved one, seek therapy for yourself. The lack of insight of an addict makes it very hard to treat them. However, it is highly treatable and fully manageable.
Would you say stigma would contribute to a person to remain in that state of abusing drugs instead of getting the help that they need?
Yes, it is because many a times we don't even seek help for these loved ones. Why? Because we go like, Zainab, you did this to yourself. I taught you to stop drinking, you didn't stop drinking. And so because of that, we tend not to seek help for the loved ones. And so the stigma comes in automatically. And so the stigma is there from our society because we don't look at it as a disease. We see it as a social behavior. Not forgetting this person, every addict was once a social drinker. Every addict once was a social drinker. But you do not know when do we flip over. When does it move from being a pleasurable activity or a social activity into a disease? So the stigma makes it very, very difficult, not only for the patient, but also for the practitioners. So we have to say no to the stigma. Let us stop looking at it like it's a problem that someone is causing to themselves. It could be there is a drive that is pushing them. Some patients we've seen presenting with what we call OCD, an obsessive compulsive disorder, whereby they have a craving. You know the way you crave for sugar, the way you crave for that donut? Some people have a natural craving for that chemical in the alcohol. And so we need to stop telling people drinking is your problem. We need to go deeper and have an understanding. Let's stop making, especially men, look like they are weak because they got addicted and they cannot control their drinking. Okay. If a man can get cancer, if a man can get diabetes, so can a man also get addicted.
Thank you for those submissions. Well, that's now a clearer picture of what circumstances surround the mind of an individual who gets addicted to drugs and substance. Well, thank you, Your Honor, for that.
Your Honor, the insights and submissions of my learned colleagues are invaluable, to say the least. And if the court will allow me, I would like to bring in some more context and even more insights through data.
We begin with the definition of substance use disorders, or SUDs. They are characterized by a pattern of continued pathological use of a psychoactive substance that results in repeated adverse psychological, behavioral, and social consequences. This is the definition according to Kenya's Ministry of Health, specifically the National Protocol for Treatment of Substance Use Disorders in Kenya. Another definition given by the National Institute of Mental Health of the United States of America is a mental disorder that affects a person's brain and behavior, leading to a person's inability to control their use of substances such as legal or illegal drugs, alcohol, or medication. Your Honor, a reality check. According to the National ADA Survey Report 2017 by NACADA, more than 4 million Kenyans were diagnosed with SUDs in 2017. Most SUDs in Kenya fall under the category of severe as compared to mild or moderate. Awareness of treatment and rehabilitation facilities in Kenya is very low at 13.4% among 15 to 65-year-olds. Now, when it comes to the identification criteria, there are 11. Taking the substance in larger amounts or for longer than you meant to. 2. Wanting to cut down or stop using the substance but not managing to. 3. Spending a lot of time getting, using, or recovering from use of the substance. 4. Cravings and urges to use the substance. 5. Not managing to do what you should at work, home, or school because of substance use. 6. Continuing to use even when it causes problems in relationships. 7. Giving up important social, occupational, or recreational activities because of substance use. 8. Using substances again and again, even when it puts you in danger. 9. Continuing to use even when you know you have a physical or psychological problem that could have been caused or made worse by the substance. 10. Needing more of the substance to get the effect you want or tolerance. 11. Development of withdrawal symptoms which can be relieved by taking more of the substance. This is also according to the NACADA report of 2017. So how does one determine how severe it is? Of the 11 criteria in identifying SUDs, if you have 2 or 3 symptoms, it's categorized as mild. 4 or 5 is moderate, and 6 or more means that your SUD is severe. On to rehabilitation centers. According to NACADA, the total in Kenya which are registered and operational are 162. 4 of these are owned by the national government, 1 is owned by a county government, and the private are the balance of 157. Of the national government owned, there is Miritini Rehabilitation Center in Mombasa County, Moi Teaching and Referral Hospital in Eldoret, Uasin Gishu County, Mathare National Teaching and Referral Hospital in Nairobi, and the Kenyatta National Hospital in Nairobi, which is only outpatient. The county government owned is Kombani Methadone Center in the county of Kwale. In various counties, NACADA says it has partnered with various counties to put up rehabilitation centers, as setting up of rehabilitation centers is a devolved function, and NACADA says it has partnered with various counties to do the same. In Nyeri, Kisii, Taita Taveta, Bomet, Kakamega, Kodiaga Prison in Kisumu, and Elgeyo Marakwet counties, the public rehabilitation centers are yet to be operationalized. Kwale is the only county government with an operational rehabilitation center.
Your Honor, the data is telling of a tale of how we could be tailing and trailing. Is this a rehabilitation situation itself? Solely rehabilitation? From the submissions of our psychiatrists, it is not. Your Honor, allow us to invite Bridget Singana to make submissions to this court on the same matter.
Thank you, Your Honor. The battle against alcoholism and by extension drug use and abuse is likely to bring to the minds of Kenyans he of the Masa Nyamutudo fame, whose voice we bring before this court as one who is not only passionate in this fight but also runs a rehabilitation center.
John Mutudo Empowerment Center was put up by me so that I can put all the knowledge that I have, all the resources that I have, to make sure that we treat addicts. We don't condemn them. I'm not very popular, as you may imagine, among these people who peddle drugs and alcohol manufacturers, Mama Pimas and the rest of it. Because from here alone, I can proudly say that we have had over 4,000 success stories. In Kenya, the chief cause is frustrations, mainly financial frustrations. Look, for instance, at our situation today, 2022. How many students do you have in schools? We have well over 18 million. none of those is guaranteed of any job anywhere. So at one point in life, in about 5 years, in about 7 years, you are going to have 18 million very frustrated people. You will find that even when our economy improved, the earnings by middle class people, most of it went to alcohol and drugs and nyama choma and sambusa. Why? Because they are not compensated properly for what they do.
If somebody comes to this facility, on average, for them to go through the whole 3 steps you've mentioned, how much would it cost?
It would cost roughly 215,000 shillings, out of which NHIF was supposed to compensate 60,000 if you have a valid card. It must be valid up to the time when you are leaving the institution. So in essence, the family costs 150,000 or roughly 50,000 per month. Out of that, you have one drug which is very expensive. It's a drug we use very widely. It's called naltrexone. Naltrexone is available at KEMSA, and it's available at 60,000 for 2 tablets. That is an implant. The worrying bit is that there are now more ladies getting addicted than they used to, and that is very, very worrying. In Kenya, we have a culture of ladies work, no matter how little they work for, she'll save something little. That saving culture is now being eroded by this new epidemic, and that is very worrying. As a chairman NACADA, we found there was a very big gap in health management in Kenya, in that over that time, about 7-9 million people were clinically diagnosed as addicts, but there was no place that could handle that kind of situation. The space we have for rehab is less than 0.1%. So they are not adequate at all. But what's even more worrying, even the inadequate ones, you find they're having 2-3 patients, simply because there is no structured compensation for the rehabs. We have helped where we can. As Jomek family and as Honorable John Mutuda, we have done about 300. Some of them are street children. There is a story that is told of an ostrich hiding its head in the sand. That is what Kenya government is doing in respect to addiction and the mental health. Continue hiding your head in the sand. By the time you get out, you'll have a president, you'll have a CEO of this country who is an addict, who is high. And he will do everything which flies on the face of the Bible, the Constitution, the Quran, the Holy Quran. He will do everything that makes this an evil society. Wake up now, Kenya. Wake up.
These are my submissions before this court of public interest. I rest.
Your Honor, without much ado, allow me to invite the CEO of NACADA, Victor Okioma, to take the stand. Thank you for coming to court at this time. Maybe you could tell us from where you sit. There have been many things that have been said about drug abuse. What are some of the new trends that you have observed, that have been observed in the country?
We have started to see a growing number of young people indulging in drug abuse. A matter that has been spoken to before, that the young people are vulnerable whenever they engage in substances, because from some of the surveys we have done, on record, the youngest person that has been found to have been initiated is 4 years. You can imagine how serious that kind of issue is. And on average, by 11 years, a number of the young people have been initiated in drug. That is a very worrying trend. The growing number of new substances that have come into the market, substances that are being abused, is also another concern that we have. It's a growing trend. Then what you would call the new psychoactive substances. They are, being manufactured in the labs. Every day they are coming up in the market. It's an issue that we are also observing as a trend. The abuse of prescription drugs, for example. is an issue that is of an emerging trend that we are very worried about. We saw people turning from, wedding grounds around the city and around the country as venues for drinking. You drive into the wedding grounds and you have your group. And so these are some of the observations that we have made, and it's a matter that is really a matter of great concern.
First and foremost, do you agree with the assertion that we don't have enough rehabs in Kenya?
Oh yes, readily I would accept. We don't have enough. And I can tell you that the highest number of the rehabs we have accredited after inspection is, I think, about 120 for a country of about how many million? When we look at this problem, I think as a country, we haven't really taken this matter very seriously. Drug abuse in this country is a serious problem. The mental illnesses that are attributed to drug abuse are growing. In fact, I think from our survey, about 10.4% of persons between 15 and 16 are having some sort of substance-related disorder. And then the question is, what is available to address the challenges that go with this?
And a concern here is the costs of accessing rehabs. It's quite expensive, and if I'm wrong, you could correct me. So first, do you agree they're expensive?
They're very expensive. Actually, I was talking to somebody not long ago of a family member who had a problem and needed to be rehabilitated. And the cost for 3 months came to around 640. And the question you ask yourself is how many Kenyans are able to access this kind of expensive services? And the problem arises from the fact that, we have very, very few rehabilitation facilities, 90% of which are privately owned, very commercial, and therefore inaccessible to many poor people who require these services.
Isn't that a somewhat negative light shed on government? If you have all these people under your watch, but you hardly have sufficient rehabilitation centers.
As a country, I think we have not invested in this area, and that's a challenge. I can tell you that, for example, previously we had, I think, about 4 government facilities that will address this kind of challenges for addiction, all right? But I must say that increasingly we have seen a number of publicly owned facilities come up through our engagement with the county governments. And I can say up to now about 10 counties have rehabilitation facilities out of our personal engagement and trying to remind them that under the new constitution, drug control, including the licensing of premises for sale of alcohol, is the devolved function. And that requires that as you finance your activities, you need to set aside the resources to do rehabs and to actually do programs, preventive programs. It's very important. And I can tell you that is an area where we have a lot of challenges. And I must say it's an area where we have work in progress, because we continue to engage county governments to try and put in resources in ADA programs, and particularly in responding to their people who are, who are suffering addiction.
So it means we have a very unfortunate situation where you've got a large mass of low-income earners in Kenya who are getting into drug and substance abuse. Then there are hardly any rehabilitation centers, and those that are there are very expensive.
Yes, of course, and let me honor that really it's an area we need to start investing in. And it's an area where I want to appeal to county governments to take up proactive action to put up rehabilitation centers for their people, and more importantly, to kind of allocate resources for programs that are aimed at, preventing initiation into drug use. The government, as a result of a presidential directive, has converted the former NYS substation in Miritini into a rehabilitation center, where we have so far around 300 people who come in on outpatient program and around 40 people who are admitted. And we expect that that will become, going forward, a center of excellence for management of substance-related disorders.
Where else can people get assistance? Because when you talk about rehab, it sounds like quite an escalation, that you need to go to rehab. It makes someone feel it's a bit extreme for some people. What other options do they have in society which are accessible?
I think as Kenyans, let's say that even before you go into a rehab, there are several other things that can be that you can go through before you end up in a rehab. I believe even in the church, we have counseling services there, and people who are in addiction have actually benefited by going to church and getting counseled. We have a number of persons out there in the community who can give you brief interventions and even advise you on what you need to do. And I think going forward, we also need to invest more on community-based rehabilitation programs. Build capacity within the community so that those who are unable to go there can be able to find some kind of support or assistance within the community. Build capacity within the community. In fact, as NACADA, we are currently working with community health workers to build the capacity to be able to identify and take remedial action before the matter goes beyond a level that you now require admission.
You've said there's a concern about a lot of youth getting into drug and substance abuse, and it's coming in new, trendier ways, as we've also seen. How do we avoid getting to this place where we even have to discuss rehabs?
By the way, that is really where, as a country, we need to invest in. Prevention programs, awareness creation among the community, and more importantly, the young people. One of the other, emerging trends that I didn't mention is that when we were locked down, the children were also at home because the schools were closed. And we witnessed, drinking bouts in the homes when the children are there and they have assignments to do. So that tells you that parenting is a big risk factor, which we need to address. And therefore, I think to me, the opportunity to cut off the number that needs to seek rehabilitation services is to focus more on prevention programs within the community, in our institutions, in our, workplace, so that we are able to really stop many people falling into the trap of addiction. Because once you have the information, you are able to make, an informed decision. In fact, like now in NACADA, we have got what we are calling the Life Skill Program. The Life Skill Program is targeting children between, I think, in class 5 to about 8, so that we can be able to give them some awareness to understand that, cannabis can get you into a problem. They even are told to identify some of the substances that are available in the market which can be abused and which can cause them problems. The purpose is to ensure we stop or delay initiation into drug use. And that is, to me, where we need to put a lot of effort. Plus, we also need to put a lot of effort in parenting, positive parenting, so that that powerful influence you have over your young children, you can use it to discourage them from being initiated. So that if you can delay it, by the time you get into maybe university, you are able to make your own decisions. You are able to decide whether you want to go that way because you have the facts. I think that is where we need to put a lot of effort as a country.
Thank you very much for your submissions to this court, Bwana Okioma, and for the insights, especially in, where you've made some insistence on avoiding getting to the situation and investing in that as well. Your Honor, a simple boy said the youth should stay away from drugs. It's not just a song or a saying in swag. No, sometimes drugs are at the heart of the butt of jokes. but those jokes are anything but jokes. Maybe we need more filters like the butt of smokes. Michelle Obama said, when they go low, we go high. But for a druggie, when they go high, they go low. They go low because they got high. It becomes more than just a battle with a bottle. It's a battle at the bottom. But be encouraged, you can get it together, as you've heard. Be in your rightful place like a button on the cotton. Yes, you can. You can keep off it all, the drugs and concussions. You're not a lost cause. You are redeemable. Pardon is your portion. You have what it takes to beat the scourge. Justice Wanjiku, these are our submissions. Now you be the judge. And that is News Court.